How was it possible for Viktor Orban to remain in power in Hungary for 16 years? Internal corruption, external support, EU silence, or all of them? We will discuss all of this in a very special episode today in Budapest. Check it out. Do you think Orban's political career is over?
Well, you can never say that in the case of Viktor Orbán. He's not someone who walks away just like that. He said that before 2010, Hungary's foreign policy was defined by Washington, D.C., Brussels, and Berlin. And he said this time is over now. Now the reference points are Berlin, Moscow, and Istanbul. The European political elite, I think, did not understand for a long time how dangerous this was. Orban said in 2009 that gaining power and keeping it depends on three things: money, ideology, and votes. They built up Volodymyr Zelensky as a major enemy of Hungary and then linked Péter Magyar, the opposition challenger, to his name.
Our guest, Zsuzsanna Szelényi, was a former member of Orbán's Fidesz party. She witnessed his rise to power and the democratic backlash of Hungary, described in her book, Tainted Democracy. She also co-founded her own political party called Together to fight the more and more unlimited power of Orban. In this episode, we discuss with Zsuzsanna what the recent results in Hungarian elections mean for the future of Hungary and for the future of Europe. Zsuzsanna, welcome, first of all.
Thank you very much for having me here.
No, thanks to you. And you wrote a book on the political corruption of the Orban regime. And the first question I would like to ask you, how is it possible that Orban stayed in power for 16 years?
So there's many reasons for that. First of all, Viktor Orbán is a very experienced politician. He was prime minister before 2010. So when he got to power with a constitutional majority in 2010, he already had an idea what he would require to govern without any checks and balances. So he started right away, and I think surprised many people in Hungary and in the world how quickly the de-democratization in Hungary has happened. The other reason, as I said, is Fidesz had constitutional majority. This was a situation which no any other country knew since the Second World War. This is an incredible, huge power. Basically, when one party can change not just any law, but the constitution on its own. And since Fidesz party is a very centralized party, therefore Orban could get his ideas through his own party and his large parliamentary group. The third thing is that over the time, Fidesz constantly changed those rules which created the political environment for challenging political parties. The most obvious example is the election rules, which were changed significantly in 2012 in order to support Fidesz party, and more than 30 times ever since. So basically, before each and every elections, Fidesz party changed the electoral rules to its own interest. So this is quite a strong thing. And of course, something more, Fidesz was a very specific party in Europe because Orban's idea was always to have money and political power. He believed early on that without being rich and without also concentrating significant wealth behind the political party, the party cannot be strong enough. And over these 16 years, an incredible wealth was also accumulated. So electoral campaigns looked like Fidesz party, the state party had like 100 times more money than all the other parties together. So this is basically, this was a very, 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 very huge power.
Yeah, and you also managed to change constitution 11 times, right?
Actually, 15 times.
15, okay.
Yes, every year the constitution. The constitution was changed in 2011 first, and then ever since, every year it was changed.
Yeah, and from an external media perspective and also political perspective, in the framework of the European Union, what do you make of the fact that the EU was observing these developments? Did they take any strong action enough to discourage it, in your opinion?
So this is a fascinating question, but without answering it, I'd like to share this, that Viktor Orbán knew from the very beginning that he wants to build up a power which lasts very long. And this power, which he named in 2014 as illiberal state, it's a very interesting kind of animal, because he promised people a new kind of democracy. His promise to Hungarians and to other parties in the world was that he can make a prosperous country without having liberal democracy. And he went against all the basic tenets of liberal democracy, basically separation of power, or neutrality of the state, or nurturing a pluralist political system. He concentrated power into his hand. He used the state resources, institutions, fundings for partisan interest, and also pushed back all those forces, groups, civil society, media, which did not share the kind of ideology which Orban said he has. The European Union, the institutions, but moreover the European political elite, I think did not understand for a long time how dangerous this was, and also believed that Hungary is too small. It's not really bothering. So we have to say that this is also kind of general view in Brussels and in many places, that a small country cannot bother too much water, but of course it can.
What does this illiberal form of democracy mean for the Hungarian people in terms of their welfare? What did it mean concretely on the ground?
Well, the democratic nature of it is that there are elections. So this was super important for Orban to win the election. This is why they changed the electoral rules all the time, that they have the legitimacy of elections. And this is why it was also oftentimes kind of misunderstood. I spoke to a lot of European politicians or from other countries when I was in politics, and said, but the guy was elected. So we know that, out of 200 countries of the world, almost all of them have elections. So elections are not enough for democracy. And of course, but this is what is in the mindset of people. So I think that's basically the answer.
And it's quite widely documented, that Orban managed to create a network of loyalists across different spheres, in media, in business circles, in the judiciary. How can we imagine that this network of allies function concretely?
So these are not kind of network of allies. These are people who were born out from Fidesz party. I think it's a very important distinction, for example, between an oligarchic state and what Hungary was until now. An oligarchic state looks like that there are oligarchs who got rich for some way or another, and they occupy the state. Well, in Hungary, there were not many rich people before Orban. I mean, it's an Eastern European country. Typically, not many wealth was recuperated. But it was Viktor Orban who used the power, the constitutional power, for certain rules that created business people through public tenders. That was actually the main tool on EU fundings, but also in many other ways. It was the legislation was used even for personal. The legislation was used for concrete people, concrete persons to get certain kind of monopolistic situations or access to public fundings. And in the first couple of years, people started to get rich around Orban, but these all made their wealth from rent seeking. So this is a different kind of system, and of course this is still a big issue now in Hungary in these days.
How powerful was this business circle around Orban that he created through the public tendering system?
Well, it was Viktor Orban who was the powerful, always. There is a very funny story. One of the richest people, who was actually rich also already before Orban, who was asked whether Hungary is an oligarchic state or not. And he said that how Hungary could be an oligarchic state when everyone knows that the most strongest person and most powerful person in Hungary is a politician. It's Viktor Orban. So this is really Orban was sitting on top of political and business power as well in the last several years.
And I imagine that also meant that within the Fidesz party there was no real competition for him. He was the unchallenged leader.
So Orban is the unchallenged leader in Fidesz since 1993. This was the first time when he was elected as party chairman. And this was a year when, after 5 years of existence, liberal Fidesz party started to change its political profile and also started to be power concentration around Viktor Orbán. So before 1993, Fidesz had a leadership board, so there was not number one person, and that was a kind of delicate balance also around Orbán, and there were other people who were balancing him. So Fidesz, though Orbán was always the most radical, Fidesz as it is was not specifically radical because there were a kind of nice balance. Well, this has all changed in '93, and ever since, almost all the time, Orbán was the president or chairperson of Fidesz, and definitely the most important person. Now, this was already a problem in 2002 when Fidesz lost election from power first, and also in 2006 when Fidesz was in opposition but lost again. There were already various attempts in Fidesz to move Orbán away or somehow balance, but it was not possible because Orbán was the person who over the time became the only person who could pull together and mobilize the entire party. So when he became prime minister first, 1998, he was by the time already on the right side, on a conservative side, and what was a big political success of Orbán is that he could basically push out other right-wing parties from the political arena, and he made a kind of conservative union party. But this was still a very diverse party, and he was the only person who could pull all these very different, the smallholders or more liberal conservatives and also kind of nationalists, various kind of people together. And I think this is still the case, and Fidesz party will have this problem in the future again.
And from the way Orban manages power, it looks that at least I see some similarities with Putin's Russia. Can you tell us what's the main link between Orban regime and the Putin's government? What is the main interest linking? Is it political? Is it ideological? Is it financial?
I think there might be similarities because obviously Russia is a country where there are elections, but I think the Russian political culture is different from the Hungarians. Hungarian is a post-communist, but it's a very European culture. It's also religiously part of the core of Europe. So culturally, the Russian culture was very different from the Hungarian and the Central European in many ways. So it's, I think, Putin was early on an autocrat. He came from the intelligence services. He, from the first day of his power, which was basically born out of the Chechen War, was somehow related to violence or force. These have never happened in Hungary. And it was very important for Viktor Orbán that Hungary is a peaceful country. Many advertisement and speeches of Orbán from the last 16 years demonstrated how important it was for him to always speaking about how smart or how peaceful this country is. There's no low level of crime. He often linked it to the multicultural or the homogeneous population, so it was oftentimes linked to the migration question. But not only that, basically being peaceful and order and legality was always very important. And it's also interesting to know that Fidesz party basically was the funders of Fidesz. Many of them came from law school, so it was always a very legalistic organization. So I think Orban could always say, even before he had the supermajority, that was always in order legally. So these kind of elements were always at least visible, very important for Orban. So I think probably Orban learned a couple of things from Putin, especially how to push out civil society organizations, the foreign agent stigma, and this kind of things. But in many other ways, the Hungarian leadership style was really different.
Many people say, we saw it in interviews, that Orban in the 90s, in the early 2000s, was a super nice guy, and then developed over time to become this authoritarian leader. Is that in line with your observation?
Well, Orban was radicalizing since 1993. This was the first time, as I said, when he got number one position in the party, and he started to push out basically other people, other potential leaders, his rivals, who, including myself, we even left the party. So Fidesz became more streamlined already in the mid-90s. And I think this happened again and again. So all the time when he, for example, when he lost elections and there was some criticism towards him, he always found that the way how to push critics out and brought in new people. In 2002, he brought a completely new membership to Fidesz from these other right-wing parties. In 2006, there was not so much pull from other right-wing parties, but for example, he made a big step to pull in younger people to whom he could offer, and of course, obviously 2010, this was a momentum again from kind of refreshing the human resources of Fidesz party. So most of my former colleagues, when I was still in Fidesz in the early 90s, were just sidelined over the time, and this was because they got to know him too well, and this was not very useful.
Yeah. And I think it's also the main point of reflection, the fact that the democratic backlash in Hungary happened within actually the framework of democracy and legalistic changes. So what could be the lesson learned of this, in your opinion, for other member states, for other countries?
Oh, there's many lessons from Hungary. I mean, the number one probably is that elections should provide a pluralistic political arena in order to maintain a multi-party system. If it's too easy to win big by election law, there is always a danger for superpower. So I think that's kind of number one story. But there are many others, of course. First of all, that ideology matters. So this technocratic perspective on politics doesn't work, probably never worked, but somehow it became a kind of norm in Europe until probably the 2008, the economic crisis, which created a vacuum for ideologist parties, specifically on the right wing, to come and fill this hole created by technocratic politics. I think it's important, and we have to do something with it. Every political party in Europe today. And then many other things. That probably one of the other most important is that democracy is not a given. We can see in other countries, it's not also illiberalism is not an Eastern European phenomena. It's built on human things. It's divisive politics is using human psyche for procreating fear. We are all kind of animals, human animals who can reflect on fear. And there are always political parties who try to use this fear-based politics, which was so dominant in Hungary in the last 16 years.
Yeah, and just coming here to record the episode, I was seeing on the street a lot of images of Magyar with Zelensky, and also the recent leak of the European Council on sanctions done by the Hungarian foreign minister to Lavrov. How could we explain to the audience this position of Orban towards Ukraine and towards Russia in the conflict?
Well, in some way it's similar, but it's two different things. So the Russia issue. Viktor Orban, when he came to power in 2010, he really designed this power for 20 years. He openly spoke about that. So he got only 16, but he did pretty well. And he was always interested in shaping politics larger than Hungary. And his idea to shape foreign policy was a very strong motivation. And he already in 2010 started to create a new foreign policy paradigm, which pulled Hungary out from the traditional, I mean, since the regime change, of course, since the 1990s, this consensual foreign policy, which was European focus and transatlantic focus, and also focus in Central and Eastern Europe, which is our closest nearby region, also in the Balkans. So this is where Hungary is placed. Orban gave a very interesting speech at one time for diplomats, and he said that before 2010, Hungary's foreign policy was defined by Washington, D.C., Brussels, and Berlin. And he said this time is over now. Now the reference points are Berlin, Moscow, and Istanbul. And if you look at the map, you can see that in the first triangle, Hungary is at the periphery. But if you look at Berlin, Moscow, and Istanbul, Hungary is in the middle. And it's a very good and easy to remember metaphor how he basically wanted to shape the environment. And in order to do that, he started to make a relationship with various Eastern powers in order to revolve the European Union and to actually build leverage within the EU. And this is very few people saw it at the beginning. I mean, we saw it in Hungary. It was so obvious change and shift from the original. I think this was also something the EU or European leaders, allies of Hungary, did not recognize early enough. So this was one thing vis-a-vis Russia. And then the other things, of course, that the energy relationship, Hungary bought significant part of its energy resources from Russia. And despite there were diversification on the table when Orban came to power in 2010, it became off the table very soon, and especially with Péter Szijjártó, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who got to this position in 2014. As from that point, the relationship with Russia has dramatically changed. Orban met Vladimir Putin every year, and we can think that this was mainly about business. I don't think that specifically on politics, except that, of course, from that point we could see that there were more conflict with Ukraine since the Crimea crisis, and more the Hungarian government, Orban and Szijjártó specifically, started to behave in a different way in the EU Council. But this really got very dramatic with the war against Ukraine. So this is how the two countries also relate to each other. Since Hungary was never very Russophile country, it's not a very pro-Russian society. We are not a Slavic country. It's a more suspicious, especially the conservatives were more suspicious, so Orban's base. He never spoke about Russia as a friend. He always presented Russia as a necessary partner, as a reliable partner, and this was the only language he could sell it to his own voting base, that we should not be worried about Russia because they are accountable. If they promise they send us the gas, they do so. So this was a kind of level of discussion. It was very kind of pragmatic approach. On the other hand, with Ukraine, this started early on, become a kind of hatred-based or kind of suspicious relationship. No one in Europe and Hungary knew much about Ukrainians in 2014. It was pretty much a kind of wide field for many Europeans. So it was relatively easy to create a view from the Ukrainian government which in 2014 started to basically nation building. That was after the Orange Revolution. So this was a moment when kind of negative commentaries on Ukraine, on corruption, Ukrainian corruption, and also how the Ukrainian government abuses or represses Hungarian ethnic minorities in Ukraine was started coming up into the Hungarian media through Fidesz politicians. And it was 2014. So you can imagine that by the time it was systematically built up over the time. So when there was a war in 2022, when Russia when Russia attacked Ukraine in 2022, there was already, specifically in the pro-Fidesz part of Hungarian public, a kind of uncomfortable feeling about Ukraine, and this was a kind of fertile soil to build up an open conspiracy theory campaign, which was our kind of specificity of Orban's media and communication technique. Always create an enemy and pull Hungarians, or at least their own voting base around the flag against the enemy, who were first the communists, then the whatever communist, then there were the globalist financiers, there was George Soros, and then there were the unknown migrants. So these were all kind of figures of whom people really did not know anyone. I mean, most Hungarians never knew about the name of George Soros before this campaign. So also the migrants, I mean, you can imagine there was not even a word for migrant in Hungarian. We only have a word like refugee. We don't have a word for migrant. We have immigrant and emigrant and refugee. So they started to use the word migrant. No one knew what the migráns in Hungarian. So they just created an environment about figures. And then in 2022, especially, this was the war, and until since then, since 2022, basically Orban's propaganda machinery created a view of as Ukraine, where there is this war. So Ukraine means equal as war. And if this is how they build up Volodymyr Zelensky as a major enemy of Hungary, and then linked Péter Magyar, the opposition challenger, to his name. It was always before the foreign enemy was always linked to the actual opposition. So it was always a kind of, it's very classy way of conspiracy campaign, and this is how it was working. And I think this was actually partly this. Orban went so far with this already in the migration crisis. It was really too much for a lot of Hungarians. It was so incredibly immoral that I think more and more people got really fed up with that. It was. I mean, specifically with Ukraine and Zelensky, this was just incredibly immoral, and I think that was one reason why he failed so badly this time.
I think something very similar happened also with the EU, right? We saw some comic strips where Magyar is portrayed as the marionette of the evil EU. Do you think that Orban's hostile stance towards the EU was a question of real belief and ideology, or more also a pragmatic decision?
Well, I got this question oftentimes, whether Orban is believing what he's saying or not. So I think there's no separation between the two. So if you build up this scenario, and this is also part of a conspiracy element, the conspiracy is important. There is always some kind of truth in it, right? So you can obviously criticize the EU. It has a lot of malfunction. It has all kind of problems. It's not perfect. But it doesn't mean that it's an enemy. So a conspiracy theory can build around these negative things and just enlarge them. So this is how it is happening. So I think Orban was never super happy with the European Union because he never liked anyone who was stronger than him. Actually, this is why I believe he never specifically liked Vladimir Putin, because he was stronger. He might respected him, or he might respected Angela Merkel, but he typically doesn't like bigger and stronger figures than him. So the EU is obviously as much as a support for Hungary and creates an environment for us. And Orban was always aware that Hungary is a European country. He never really liked the constraints from the EU as an institution. So it was also really interesting to see how in his narratives Orban separated Brussels from Europe and presented Europe to Hungarians as who we are. We are Europeans. It's not a single question about that. 80% of Europeans, well, Hungarians also like the EU membership. But he also said that, but there is something specifically bad, these globalist forces in Brussels. So it was a kind of double language.
Yeah, and I think it was helpful for the creation as well of an enemy, from a communication perspective, to label the EU as the problem, because it would also distort attention. But one point is also, how did Hungary benefit from the European financial support for its economic growth in the last 16 years?
So Hungary profited from EU membership in many different ways. And it's very important that money is only one of them. It's significant, however. Hungary got in the previous 7-year cycle like 4, sometimes even 6% of the GDP from the EU. So it's a huge, just by volume, it was a very important contribution to the Hungarian economy. And actually, until 2020, the Hungarian economy was pretty well, partly thanks to this money, and also because of the European economy and German economy altogether, which we are related to, went pretty well. So money is only one issue. But the other thing is EU members enjoy, in the word, a kind of respect. Outside actors, states, business actors, investors look at EU members as a kind of guarantee. So, for example, it's very important for Eastern European countries that EU membership means that you can come here, you can invest, you can have your money here. And this is also super important. I mean, except Poland, all of our countries in Central and Eastern Europe live on FDI. We just don't have still, after 30 years, not enough wealth in our countries. We are not very competitive enough. Despite of a lot of incredible development, we are still less developed than other countries in the core of Europe. And this kind of element of supporting the investment is very important. There's a lot of cultural relationship. The Schengen zone, the free movement of anything. It's just fascinating. I think we made a political mistake of previous governments not celebrating it enough, because it was actually such a huge step. And all Hungarians, especially everyone under 40, believes it's a kind of basis. And this was also a problem with Orban recently, that it became too realistic that Hungary can get out of the EU. And we will lose not just the money, but we will lose our status, our Europeanship, especially for young people. 90% of under 35 voted against Orban 2 weeks ago. So that's spectacular. And this is a new generation who already grew up within the EU, and it's an unquestionable status for us. So it's a very complex issue, and I think Hungarians do understand that.
And Zsuzsanna, you mentioned before that you were in the 90s part of the Fidesz party, then you left, and in 2012 you founded your own opposition party. I think it's called the Together Party. How can we imagine that it is to run an opposition party under the Orban government?
So Together Party was not established by me. I was a co-establisher, but there were a bunch of people who as the name of our party demonstrate, we thought that as the Hungarian political arena is incredibly bipolar because of the electoral system, the smaller opposition parties under Orban can only make a difference if they get together and collaborate. And this was, I think, our effort. It was very pragmatic and clear. The problem was that we had to collaborate with those parties who lost, who were defeated by Orban. And the Hungarian public turned away from these parties. This is actually the profile of the public. They turn away from the losers. And they don't like the losers. I mean, their own voters do not like them, right? They are frustrated. And especially with Orban's superpower, it was a huge defeat for all the other parties who were practically, I mean, the Liberal Party, SDS, actually even disappeared. They lost their people behind. But the Social Democrats, some other parties, a new Green Party, there were smaller parties still in a parliament. And the problem was that there were new parties and there were the old parties responsible for Orban's big victory. And this was a kind of mission impossible, you know, because you had to collaborate with those who people really disliked. There was a previous Prime Minister, Ferenc Gyurcsány, who was even kind of an enigmatic or a very clear leader, a loser, also blamed by Fidesz for years and years for making putting Hungary on the losing side of economy and everything. So basically, there was the basic paradox in the party of together and as a mission impossible, and we failed. But I think it was an important learning point for Hungary. 4 years later and 8 years later, there were still this kind of effort from the opposition parties that collaboration is the way forward. But at the same time, there were the smaller parties, but there was a massive leadership crisis. None of the leaders of the smaller parties could convince the other opposition parties that to rally behind them. And I think Péter Magyar understood this, so he learned from the opposition logic. And when he came to the field, he did not start to talk to the opposition parties at all. He changed this kind of opposition strategy paradigm, and he said, I start completely new. I'm not part of Fidesz any longer. I'm not part of these losers either. And I think this was one of the major secret of his success, that he positioned himself as something completely new, and he managed it pretty successfully.
He also positioned himself as an outsider as well, like an outsider from the usual political arena.
Like who?
Like Magyar, like he positioned himself like an outsider. Is also what helped him, or was seen as part of the system by the population?
Well, I mean, you can see the result. I think Magyar obviously comes from Fidesz. Interestingly, when he started to speak publicly and criticizing Fidesz, which was February 2024, it was clear that he is from Fidesz. This gave him a specific legitimacy, because what he said was not specifically new to what previous opposition, or let's say what my party back then were saying about corruption, about neglecting proper governing of education, healthcare, transit system, whatever. But because he came from inside, everyone believes him. I mean, he was someone who saw it. So he know if he tells this must be right. So this kind of, it was really fascinating to see how it was evolving. Of course, the other thing that helped him, that this big disappointment with the opposition, which lost again in 2022. And as I said, people turn away from opposition. So there was basically a complete vacuum on the opposition side. And Magyar could fill this vacuum. And just 2 weeks after his first interview, he already had a huge fan base. So it was a spectacular opportunity for him, and he played it pretty well.
So basically he had the whistleblower credibility during the campaign.
Absolutely.
But one thing is a campaign, and now it actually comes to govern the country. Do you think that is a party who, of course, doesn't have any government experience yet, neither does Magyar? Do they actually have what it takes to now make the reforms that are necessary for the country?
So, first of all, I'm teaching at this university leadership, and I have a conviction that opportunity makes real leaders. So no one is born as a leader, though there are certain characteristics which help someone to be a good leader, but knowing the momentum and the opportunity is really the chance for someone. We know a lot of people from history who become big, who no one knew before. So so I think Magyar was not a good campaigner before, but he already proved to be a good campaigner, so that at least we know. Now, what we see now is that, okay, I start this again. So Hungary is now facing extraordinary challenges, and Magyar's government will face huge issues because there are, first of all, very high expectations. Almost 80% of Hungarians voted, and a significant majority of these people voted for him. So there are huge expectations for him to make this country in order. This means that he should govern well. The whole campaign was about the governance questions. He should also do it legally, on rule of law basis, and he also should do it democratically. He should re-democratize Hungary. Now, legality they will be able to produce because they have the constitutional majority. There's a huge legitimacy, is a big resource. But doing everything fast, efficient, and democratic is really the big issue here, and this is what we are going to see in the next months and years. But obviously, what we see now, it's every day, it's the creation of the new government happening in these days. I think Magyar demonstrates that he pulls together a government where there are a lot of people who know things which he is not so well at, which is also a very important leadership skills. And so far it's pretty convincing. Mm-hmm. So it probably will be a technocratic government. He's collecting a lot of people with high experience around him. And there is a huge enthusiasm and kind of mission-oriented political group sitting in the parliament who do have this feeling that they should really do the best for Hungary.
I think the main challenge for him will also be to go fast in a system that was previously designed by Orban. Do you think he will manage to be as efficient, or it will need some time to adjust the system, not to make it back to something that functions at a speed that he wants?
Well, as I said, there's plenty of challenges, and the constitutional system of Hungary at the moment doesn't support governing. It's almost a constitutional nonsense at the moment. So there's a lot of correction necessary in order that the new government can start to work. And therefore, Magyar already announced that incredibly intensive legislation from the first day of the parliament, which will sit together on 9th of May. I can imagine that the parliament will sit all summer and they will work because there are very important deadlines ahead of Hungary. For example, just one example. Hungary, for 5 years since COVID, is in a state of danger. This is a kind of status which was created by Fidesz. It's a kind of state of emergency, which provides the government the opportunity to rule without the approval, create laws without the approval of parliament. So there are approximately 150 laws which were made by the Hungarian government without parliamentary approval in the last 5 years. All kinds of things. So most of them has nothing to do with the whatever state of danger, which is not even existing. And then the deadline for this is 13th of May. Now, if there is no prolongation of the state of danger, these 150 laws and regulations, which are sometimes provide people. So these are all kind of things like, for example, paying farmers money if there was no rain, or for in kind of reorganization of the childcare system, or or, for example, price cap, which the Orban government introduced on various food stuff and energy prices. So without prolongation of this status, if this all become invalid from one day to another, and the Hungary will face a massive chaotic situation because the validity of these bills will be over. So this is, for example, just one of the incredible lot of challenges under high time pressure, and the other one is. Getting the EU funds back, which were frozen, which were different kind of fundings. And for example, one part of this, which the RRF will run out in August, and the Orban government did not basically started to use this. So if the new government not just approves all or creates a political environment or the legal environment of if the new government does not fulfill the criteria of receiving this money back, then it's not just a question of that, but we can actually physically lose this money, which is a huge amount, and of course Hungary does need it, not just because of it's important by volume, but also because we are in a huge economic crisis. So there are plenty of big challenges ahead of the next government.
And you said before that there are many positive signs now, how Magyar presents himself, how he might govern, and I agree. I mean, clear commitment to free media, clear commitment to also letting oppositions voice their concerns, clear pro-European sentiment. At the same time, there are people who are skeptical because they say that, until 2 years ago, the guy was actually within Fidesz, and many of his positions are similar to what Orban was proposing. And also his leadership style, many say that actually he's quite a strong man, how he leads TISA. Do you think there is a risk that he develops in a similar direction as Orban did?
So I think what we saw from Magyar so far, what I can see like similarity is the energy. So obviously the guy is extremely motivated, energetic, inner-driven, and this is what Orban always had, and which is, again, I think it's a very important character of a good leader. So otherwise, there's no two person the same. He's also a very different generation. He has a very different family background. He comes from a different profile of he went through a completely different socialization. So I don't think that we definitely should think about these terms. Everyone should be valued on what he or she is doing, and this is what we saw so far is fine. And we obviously hope that he will be someone. Probably he has this ambition to really make Hungary on a right path, and not just use the country for personal benefits of power and money.
Mm-hmm. And for one time, the loser in Hungary is Orban. So, considering the results of these elections, do you think Orban's political career is over?
Well, you can never say that in the case of Viktor Orban. I mean, he's not someone who walks away just like that. So, this is also a big mandate of this new government to basically cut all those resources which made Orban such a powerful politician in Hungary, in Europe, in the world. And it goes beyond legislation. It also refers to the incredible wealth Orban accumulated behind his party, which is just as big challenge than the constitutional situation of Hungary at the moment. So I would suggest he would try to pull the party together again. He was successful in doing that before, but now he is facing structural challenges. Fidesz lost its younger voting base. It's a really old voting base for a party. You cannot change this from one day to another. So I'm not sure that he will be able to do that.
Yeah, and what also this defeat does it mean for the allies of Orban politically across Europe, like Le Pen or Salvini, all this network of sovereignists that actually run on an ideology that was very similar to Orban's ideology? What means for them? Will also we are political blow to them or will not impact?
So Orban said in 2009 that gaining power and keeping it depends on three things: money, ideology, and votes. What he sold in the world as illiberal ideology, but he always used more than that. As I said, he always used Hungary's state resources for partisan and his own purposes. So he funded a lot of things. First of all, his own business clientele, but also he funded the build-up of this international network. So he also captured the Hungarian state. So other right-wing politicians cannot provide an alternative democratic model as an illiberal model if they don't capture the state, which Orban did. So ideology was just one thing, and also the votes, which goes beyond actually the votes, which we talked about, the legitimacy, the electoral legitimacy, but it also meant in Orban's situation that basically controlling legislation and using the law and legal framework for their own purposes. And I think right-wing parties should understand that the storytelling part is just one bit, and it's not enough. It's not enough, and it's not even a proper ideology, because the promise of Orban that he provides an alternative way of democracy, kind of prosperity for people without liberal democracy, proved to be untrue in Hungary 2 weeks ago.
And to conclude, now with the new government soon starting their mandate, how do you think the role of Hungary within Europe, within the EU, will develop from here on?
Well, Hungary has the whole people. So we are talking about more than Péter Magyar and his new government and political force, TISA party, has to face this challenge now to redemocratize our country. The government, with this huge empowerment, is an important element. But I hope that we learned in the last 16 years that democracy is such a vulnerable thing, and that superpower is dangerous in anyone's hands, and how Hungary was politicized, mobilized in the last 2 years, kind of out of a sleeping state for 14, it was really extraordinary. So I imagine a kind of complete revival of civil society. TISA party is also a movement itself. It's not an army like Fidesz party was. It's a much more diverse and active base than any other parties since I remember. So these are really promising things. We do not only have to rethink and reconstruct democracy or liberal democracy in Hungary, but we have to fulfill something to ourselves, which is a big question for Hungary for 100 years. Hungary should fulfill its promise to itself for something we were lacking for 100 years. It's basically to make a modern society with citizens, active citizens, and a pluralist society where respect is obvious for everyone, where everyone has a space, and protect this plurality, which was so much under danger in the last 16 years.
Well, thanks a lot, Zsuzsanna.
Thanks, Zsuzsanna.